Alrighty, we are officially recording now. Hello, and welcome back to Amestris Audio, podcast number 2. I am Quint, aka Steve, and this is, I almost said the wrong name. Katakan, I can't pronounce stuff.
My name is Cameron Douglas, otherwise known as Katashiki Otsasuke. Hmm.
The way that you pronounce that so easily and I struggle, even though I've watched like anime for like literally over 15 years of my life, amazes me. It shows that even a nerd like me still struggles with basic pronunciation.
I am now fully Otsasukified, so I am now Katashiki.
Katashiki is
Katashiki.
is that a board? Wait. Okay, hold on. Is that a actually? Wait, I probably shouldn't ask that because I'm still in the middle of the Fourth Shinobi World War. I probably would be best not to spoil myself. And this is an FMA stream, so I don't want to get too sidetracked. I mean, we'll
Keep in
sidetrack
mind,
anyways.
I made it up, so
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, never mind then. There's just nothing,
the
nothing for me to
Otsasuki
worry
part,
about.
not okay. The Otsasuki part, obviously not, but the Katashiki part I made up.
Yeah, like it's actually really funny. I have this character. I role play in a Fire Emblem Fates role play. I named Jingu. He's one of the Hoshiden sites, and they have like all the Japanesey names. And like, there's literally no one in Hoshido that's named Jingu, and I just chose that because there's a character in Yakuza, I believe Kiwami, named Jingu. Literally the final boss of the game, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds Japanesey enough. That's kind of the thing with names. You just kind of roll with what you like or sounds
Yeah,
cool.
names. All right.
Alrighty then. So,
So episode three, Mother, is one of the worst anime episodes of all time. The backstory, the backstory. Why would the Elrics need a backstory?
wow, bro, that's
This
quite
is
a way to open up
obviously
the conversation.
this is obviously just filler. Like this is just filler. Okay,
For
so
those
in
who
all
saw our
seriousness,
tier ranking listing, you know that this is purely sarcasm.
yes. Uh, this is one of the. This was always one of my favorite episodes in O3. As I told you, this is actually where I got into O3 properly. Not that I disliked the Cornello episode or anything. Like I would say, episode one was like I was like, oh, I'll see where this goes, and then episode two, I was like, oh, this is getting a little more intriguing, and then in episode three, I was like, yep, now I'm hooked.
It's a
Now
lot like
I'm hooked.
actually how it's actually kind of weird. This might be a bit of a weird time to bring this up. I've had a very similar experience with Demon Slayer where like the very first like couple episodes I was like, yeah, it's nice, I can see, like I can see why people enjoy it, but I didn't have like anything that like really massively got to me until I got to the Akasuka arc where Tanjiro fought Yahaba and Susumaru, as well as meeting Muzan for the first time. I'm like, okay, now I see. Like, this is the a highlight. What really grabs you.
Hmm. Yep.
It's actually really
And
funny because flashbacks are often like, and I mean often like, really heavily criticized in anime and even just storytelling in general. Flashbacks are typically speaking a plot device, but I want to give credit to episode 3 Mother here. This is a flashback done right, and it's a flashback that lasts the whole episode. So that's quite a lot of praise to give it, especially when, like I said, flashbacks are very hard to write. And even when a series writes a good flashback episodes, I feel like the general anime community is going to criticize it anyways, just because of the reputation flashbacks have.
yeah, and I would say that episode three is definitely one of the most tight. Like I wouldn't say any screen time was wasted or anything like that. I think this is just a very tight emotional piece of media. I like that. I like that the first act is kind of like them. They're looking up stuff with the books. Um, you know showing the proper process of them, you know, finding what they're going to do with the alchemy and stuff.
It also makes sense that
Uh,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say that uh, the um, well, you see, like when when it opens up, and then you have uh them looking, because this beforehand was like much earlier on in mangahood, whereas
It's
no
actually really funny
free.
that you mentioned that. I'm sorry to interrupt. I know
Wait,
you're kind of
wait,
clamming up a
sorry,
little bit.
much later on. I mean, I screwed up my wording.
That's fine. I actually want to point this out while you're on the topic of it. I'm sorry if I'm interrupting. That's admittedly a bad habit of mine. I get a little too chatty sometimes, and I tend to intervene. But I really want to say this while I have the chance. The way the flashback is triggered actually makes a lot of sense. I mean, they're literally looking at books that, Edward says himself, well, this really takes you back, like Introduction to Alchemy or whatever the book is called. And from
Yeah.
there, that's when the flashback triggers because they had read this
Mm-hmm.
particular book in Hohenheim study as kids.
Mm-hmm.
And like it's not even like made a big deal out of, they just look at the book, it fades, over to the past. And
Yeah.
honestly, I gotta say right now, honestly, most of the first like 10 or so episodes of Full Metal Alchemist '03 are basically detailing the Eds early, or the Elric's early days. I keep calling them the Eds, like they're from Ed, and Eddie. I swear to God. But yeah, like the first act of Full Metal Alchemist '03, like episodes 1 through 10, are, like I said, they're basically just detailing the early days of the Elrics. And I kind of like that.
Yeah.
You see them grow
Um.
up alongside the rest of the plot, and Brotherhood just kind of puts you when they're already state alchemists. I mean, of course, we do see like the actual state, alchemy exam, with Shao Tucker and Nina. We'll get to that later in the '03 incarnation.
Ye-
But I like it how '03 actually shows us like more of them as kids, starting from this
mhm.
episode of seeing some of their early missions, like with A Forger's Love, The Train. And you could also count the Cornello and Phantom Thief episodes too, because those are like, the Elric's early missions as state alchemists. I really like that. Like I said, it makes the scaling and like natural increase in stakes slash scale of things feel really natural. I mean, it goes from just the Elrics, finding out their own personal objectives while working as state alchemists until they gradually, expose, the state military and all that. It's just really nice to see how it starts out like mission based and grows into something more.
So like, I can see why people would find the age gap between like 2 and 3 confusing, but um, because it's not explicitly like y- you have to kind of pay attention in order, like it's not
Yeah,
like
it's out of
hard to
chronological
figure out.
order.
Like it's not hard to like figure out or anything. It's just more so that it's
Because
like
it's out of chronological order, it's a little more
it's
confusing.
it's it's just like when you're in episode 2 and then you're in episode 3, it's like, oh, it's like the average person isn't going to know if that really was a flashback or not, since Ed's design while younger is a little more subtle, so it's hard to kind of
Yeah.
picture it. But at the same time,
Like
while
the
I
anime doesn't
can
really make it a secret either, but it is something that will undoubtedly throw the audience off if
at
they're
the
going in
same
blind.
time at the same time, while it can be confusing, um, I actually kind of like that it doesn't outright show like that they are that much younger, since it kind of fits O3's more show don't tell approach, which
Actually,
I really enjoy.
speaking of which, I do want to say this while we're on the topic of episode 3 Mother. I mean, something this episode excels at is answering questions. I mean, To be fair, like the answers to said questions are pretty obvious, especially with dialogue in episodes 1 and 2 with Cornell, where he's like, "You two committed the ultimate sin. You tried to bring back your mother, and you lost your arm and body, and rada 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 rada." And here we actually see the actual process of that. A flashback being the best, if not only way to show that. But something episode 3 Mother does excel at is, like I said, answering questions that you may have had or may continue to have. But episode 3 Mother is not just about answering questions, because that would be kind of lame. It also keeps
Mhm.
it open, and it leaves things like it leaves you it both you feel a sense of, like, oh, so now it makes sense, but you're also left wondering, well, what are they going to do going forward? And I really like storytelling that's like that. I mean, writing open-ended stories, like that is very difficult to balance. I mean, if I were to, this is a hot take of mine. I think Shield Hero Season 2 does a great job of this, because Shield Hero Season 2, sure, I know it's
Mhm.
controversial, but it answers a lot of questions, but it leaves things open. And even though it's, traditional, that really makes it easier for me to get into. For those who don't know enough, it's still enjoyable on its own because it's structurally traditional, but also because there are little details that leave more to examine, it leaves a lot of open ends. And for an early part of the story, that's a really good way to get viewers engaged, because it leaves them in a position of cluelessness, like the Elrics, while also you just see and experience the things they experience too. It's a great way to get the audience in the position of the protagonists.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. I will say also. The the episode, like, here's the thing. Um. I am a firm defender of Ofri's animation. I think that episode one is the most inconsistent of all 51, but um, it has very high highs, like I said.
And it kind of
Um,
has to be with it being a pilot. I mean, that's usually
yeah,
how it goes in animation.
yeah. Like, completely. I'm just mentioning, for the
Of
sake of
course, it makes sense.
that. But like, so like, and then episode two, right? It's like episode two has like much better animation. It's like night and day, crazy. Um, like as much problems as I have with that episode, and I have quite a few problems with that episode. The animation is not one of them. Like when they animated that big stone golem, that was great. That was
And
a
honestly, they could have
spectacle.
easily used CGI for that, and the fact that it still looks really natural, I'm impressed,
Mhm.
honestly. For 2003, might I add.
Yeah,
And like
and
2003 was an infamous period for
mhm,
animation. There's some really good series with animation in 2003, and others very not.
and like you'll notice in episode three, like when they burn the house down and stuff, like those flame effects. Wow,
And
they
the
go
lighting
hard.
on like the Ed's face as they stare at it, it looks almost too good from like a shadow
Mhm.
and lighting perspective.
Yeah, um, yeah, for sure. Like it just looks very clean at this stage, I would say. Uh, Especially at the end. So it's like it's definitely has a strong impression on me, even if it's not as tight or as later animations, because the show had just improved in this regard as it goes along.
Yeah, and it's just starting out
Um,
too. So like, expecting it to hold up with the late series is,
yeah,
kind of, it kind of makes sense given how these sort of
I
things
will
go
say
production
though,
wise.
like there is some very impressive looking stuff. Like even in episode three, like if you look at the background for like if you look at the background um for the location they're in, the outskirts of the household,
Yeah.
you can see like the very nice colors contrast, and like it's very detailed. It looks
Oh, and not
much
only that,
better than
actually, because you mentioned backgrounds, Fullmetal Alchemist 03 is really good about backgrounds, not only because they look nice, but also they're not just still frames. There usually is something moving in the background, whether it be like the clothes on the clothesline or the grass or the wind or the trees or whatever. Like, I like it how the backgrounds feel alive while also not just being
Mhm.
still frames. Because yeah, okay, still frame backgrounds are sometimes a necessary evil, to cut down on animation costs. But when a series can have really alive feeling backgrounds, it makes it feel way more immersive.
Yeah.
As for the
So
plot of, oh sorry, go ahead.
go on.
Oh, okay. Well, as for the plot of episode 03, Mother, I mean, do I really need to say much? I mean, this is the upbringing of the Elrics, and honestly, seeing the brothers as kids, as well as seeing Trisha, actually it's just really nice. I mean, you really get the impression that they're a family, even with Hohenheim being absent. Now, I will admit, I do have my fair share of gripes with O3 Hohenheim. I actually do prefer Brotherhood Hohenheim. That's a topic for another day, though. But I do like it how they do a really good job at like showing off that yes, these people are family. It also shows, Winry's a childhood friend. We really get the impression that, Trisha really does care about her kids. And if I'm being honest here, I think Trisha's actual death scene itself, where you just see the light in her eyes fade away, I think that is way more like I actually like the actual like death itself in O3 more, not only because O3 focuses a lot more on Trisha, whereas Brotherhood focuses more on Hohenheim, but also just because, again, the subtlety and honestly, we just had more time to be spent. And to think it's all covered in one episode really impresses me more than anything.
Yeah. Um. Like, I also love the way the mother is like, like she's shown to be like already very, very knowledgeable about this stuff.
Yeah.
Like, impressively so. She even brings out a book outside. It's crazy.
What's even
Um.
more shocking to me is that, like, again, for an episode that's focusing on these characters, that when they're like just kids, it doesn't feel like it's hard for me to describe it without sounding like I'm comparing it to other stuff. But like usually when series do flashbacks as characters as kids, it only really like lasts during the episode. However, even in episodes like 4 and 5, I still get the impression that the Eds are young, and I really like it how it shows even with like them having like a slightly different design. Maybe a bit of time has passed. I like it how we still get to see the Eds like mentally speaking as kids. I called them the Eds again. It's not Ed, and Eddie. I swear. Ugh.
Oh yeah, and then of course, something else I really loved about the episode actually. That always took me as a surprise too, is that Winry also has it happen to her. So it's like you've got this double dynamic going on
Yeah, you
where
got this parallel
Edward,
happening.
yeah, like Edward gets to see how Winry's, you know, emoting to all this, and then like you know, like like Winry's, she she has to, you know, deal with the discussion that happened so soon after.
Yeah,
Um,
it actually shows a really good. It shows the many angles of handling loss.
hmm, yeah,
And speaking of
uh,
which, we actually, I have to talk about this now that I have the chance. The actual transmutation of Trisha, this one is pretty uncontested for me. It's way better handled in O3 because of what they don't show you. I mean, in
yes,
Brotherhood, they showed on screen for a decent while what the product of the transmutation of Trisha Elric after she died looked like. It was gruesome for sure, and while they do show us here later on, and it's still gruesome, I like it here how we don't actually get to fully. We get a brief frame, we get a frame of like just like the face or like the eye or whatever. But I like it how in this case we don't see what the Eds created and we just see them react. Like you can tell by Ed's facial expression, he's horrified. He's like, "Oh my god, what did I create?" And after losing his arm and the body of his younger brother, like, geez, you can see his face and you can tell he has snapped.
yeah, and the way the Roy scene happens is pretty pretty different tonally, like a lot more somber. I like that about it. Um, because it's very, you've got very intense rain outside. It's almost like it's
And we know
battering
how
down.
Roy handles water.
Yeah,
That's
it's perfect because you even get like it's actually perfect because like earlier on in the episode you literally get a shot of Roy just standing in rain, like literally like posing, and
and like especially when you know what water does to Roy, like it's
it's
actually
like
kind of poetic. And this is before that's established for the record. Yeah.
yeah,
Man.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly why I'm saying it's perfect.
And something I also kind of
Um,
like is that like when Roy is there standing, on his way to, to the house, you can just see in his face, he's like he can tell something's gonna go wrong. It shows that he's got his intuition going on. I mean, and
yeah,
sure enough, his intuition was right because I mean, well, look at the Elrics and what happened to Trisha. So, yeah, Colonel Roy Mustang, dude knows what's going on. He's got good intuition. Can't say much more than that. Uh,
and you know what? I'm just gonna come in and say it. That Ed and Al fight later in the episode is like I really took that for granted. Like that is a pretty epic fight, to be honest. Like you'll notice that it even moves like they do in the credits,
hmm.
like with a bit of flow to it.
Oh, I
Which
didn't
really
notice
fits the style of this batch of episodes.
that. Yeah.
Um,
It also has
so
a lot of meaning, showing that, now that Ed has gotten used to, his auto mail and, he can go hand to hand with Al. There's actually a lot of meaning in that, especially when you take into
oh,
account what he said to Rose at the end of episode 2. Stand on your own 2 feet, which there he does.
also, I have a defense for the blood seal thing because I was overlooking that for a long time. I I finally realized what I wasn't looking at right, which was okay. So the implication is that Al, like, it literally shows that Al can float. So and that, like, it literally shows that in the footage. So it's like he was floating with the blood seal, not at that part of the armor because it's in a very
It's
specific
literally in his
spot.
head.
Yeah, no, they actually did think about that in case anyone's like doubting me.
It's actually really funny too because like okay, I don't mean to point fingers at Brotherhood here, but we also know that the seal can be like slightly, I repeat, slightly smeared. It's only if it's fully erased that it like debonds or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, and like to begin with, it's only a problem if they made a rule about it beforehand, and they didn't to
Yeah,
begin
like
with. So
I
either
don't
way,
think
it
they
would
even
have been a problem.
mentioned, how the blood seal worked during then. So like even then it's not
Well,
that big of a deal.
well, I believe they explain it later on at one point, but even so, they like there's no rule that's saying that I remember that says, oh yes, water is strong enough to like make
Especially
it
blood
go
that's been
because
like stained in there for God knows how
yeah,
long
you
now.
have to understand, right? Like water is a very very light thing. Like that does not weigh
Putting
much.
your science knowledge to use there, huh?
I mean,
Try
you
hard,
can tell.
alchemist.
You can literally tell just by touching it that it's not that heavy.
It's funny because like, when I bleed, like, like I have like a nosebleed or whatever, like the stain that like if I am running over to the bathroom or something to get a paper towel and someone drops on my hands, I still have to scrub pretty thoroughly to get it out. And if it's on metal,
Hmm.
you're gonna have to scrub even more thoroughly. And if you just splash it, it's not all gonna go away.
Yeah, I think people are just looking too deep into it, to be honest.
I
But
think like okay, some people could call it an oversight, and half of me understands that, but really, it's not that big of a deal. And what are they gonna do? Kill off Al in episode 3 because the blood seal got smeared? No, they're not gonna do that. Why?
yeah, well, uh, yeah. I mean, I can't really say I have anything new to add, to be honest, to episode three. So I think we'll just move on to episode four.
Episode
Episode
4,
three was
Forger's
just
Love. Oh
okay.
boy, this is an infamous
Really
one.
quickly, really
Oh,
quickly before I dive into episode four.
Okay.
Episode 3 for me gets a 9. There is very little I would change about it.
I mean, I still basically stand by my placements in the tier ranking video, and because I put like episode 3 in S tier, that of course remains unchanged. This is most certainly one of FMAO 3's best episodes, if not its best.
In
Of course, though,
fact,
I
no,
will
wait
have
a
to go
minute.
back and analyze since it might be a little unfair for me to claim that now. But hey, all
Wait
the
a
more
minute.
reason to look for the
No,
content.
no, 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 no. I forgot. Yeah, no, my rating changed to a 10. I forgot.
Well, you don't
Yeah,
have to stand
no.
by what you said in the video. I mean, after all,
No, 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 no,
I
no, no,
haven't
no,
seen
no,
FMA.
no, 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 no. I really do believe it's a 10.
All right. I mean, hey, I'm not faulting you, bro. I'm not faulting. I mean, it's a great episode. What can I
I,
say?
I, I, there are multiple 10s and all 3 for me, believe it or not.
Hey, it's okay to have multiple tens. I mean, I'm that way with Gun X Sword. I think the first episode is actually one of the best for a similar reason here. All the screen time was very effectively used.
You know, it's funny, right? Like, as much as I like, like adore all 3, like I adore every aspect of it. I'm like, you know, like I won't I won't praise it to be more than it is or anything. It's like I won't like I won't like try to like downplay anything that goes wrong. No, I'll still absolutely criticize it, of course,
Yeah, I mean,
because
the same
I'm
thing
like,
with Brotherhood. I'm not going to overrate it, and if there is something wrong, I'm going to point it out. That's how an honest
because
reviewer
like
should take things.
I'm like, yeah, I love all 3, but like, I would like you have to understand that I also have to be like 100% consistent
Yeah, you got
when
to be realistic.
I I tier things, like, and then when I go like when I have an issue and say someone takes it down to say an 8, right? Like, now, now of course this can be my favorite show in spite of the idea that you know that it may have
Dips.
not even that minor of issues.
Yeah. And it's actually
Um,
really funny that you mention that because like I'm the way with Gun X Sword. I can certainly praise Gun
yeah,
X Sword calling it the perfect anime. However, I will admit there are things about Gun X Sword, even though I've seen many animes, Gun X Sword still remains like my favorite thing of all time. I will admit there are some things, even though I've barely heard anyone review Gun X Sword, there are a few things I do understand why people would not be into it. But I mean, and and I don't ignore them. I do validate
yeah,
and point out things that need to be pointed out, and you know. I do that for Shield Hero. I love Shield Hero. Yes, I know it's a controversial series, and I will admit there are things about Shield Hero I don't like. However, I won't underplay them, but I also won't let it
I-
ruin my personal enjoyment. Because if I enjoy something in spite of that, then I really should not make it a secret that I enjoy something in spite of that. I'll still point it out
um,
for the sake of it, because that's what an honest person should do. But overall, the only experience I can really comment on is, well, my own, because I'm the one who experienced it. And if my experience is what I'm going off of, then I think there's not really a lot of room for doubt there.
yeah. This is precisely why, like, well, obviously, now I'm just gonna mention this really, really quick. It's just that, like, I'm looking forward to covering Al's identity crisis because if there's any issue I have with Wolf 3, it's stuff to do with Al, which is yet to come, of course.
And honestly,
Um,
Al's identity crisis was not even that good in Brotherhood anyways. That's like one
true,
constant between both adaptations or any FMA adaptation. I've just never liked the whole, you know, Barry's
yeah,
all like, "You're a puppet," and Al's like, "What? No, I'm not." It's like one. Not only is it introduced a little bit late, like if they introduced this
yeah.
earlier when Al still had like a bit more of a childish mentality, I would maybe get him doubting it. But because it's brought up like during Lab 5, and by that point the Eggs bond is pretty firmly established. And the fact that Al just
Um,
like actually like kind of believes it, it doesn't feel very believable to me is all.
I don't think it was too bad when they cooked it in the actual Lab 5, but when they got to the hospital, that was where I was just like,
There's all
like
like
this is
not only that, but
too,
it's dealt with almost immediately.
yeah,
Like it feels
yeah. Like, that
super
was
trivial,
pointless.
which is not very good if I'm being honest. Like if they're gonna make a big deal
Yeah,
of it having literally Barry's words echo in
yeah.
Al's head and it gets solved like boom,
Like
it feels not that important, honestly.
Like, I will admit the Brotherhood one is actually kind of pointless. It's very much the same way in the manga. It's like, it's just, you know, it's, well, the thing is, right, is that there is, like, it's funny because if there's anything that, funnily enough, I actually prefer in Brotherhood, believe it or not, well, in spite of the identity crisis, it's actually Al's character, believe it or not, because I actually really like Al's character in Brotherhood.
It's really funny
Um,
because like I've done my absolute best to refrain making comparisons to Brotherhood because like that's not my objective here. I mean, seeing as we're talking about O3, however, sometimes these comparisons are kind of necessary because like really, Fullmetal Alchemist has such a big name that it's just easier to associate it with well itself and like because Fullmetal Alchemist has so much content to work with across both adaptations, the manga, and all this other stuff. You know, like there are things about Brotherhood I generally prefer over O3. However, I won't lie when I say there are things that both adaptations do equally well, and also things the adaptations do equally not so well. But that's anime for you. I mean, not everything has to be a comparison. This is actually a bit of a weird reviewing principle of mine. I use comparisons not in like a critical way unless it actually hinders my enjoyment.
yeah, like, keep in mind, by the way, I don't like dislike Al and 03 or anything. I do like Al and 03.
Of course, it's
Right?
Alphonse. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, Lily, I don't
It's
know anyone who doesn't like Al. I'm not even joking
I
when I
just think that Al has some really dumb decisions in all three that I will get very in depth into when we get there. But
say
enough
well,
stalling. So
yeah. Let's talk
episode
about
four,
the one,
Forger's Love.
episode 4 of Forger's Law.
You can
Infamy
tell you
incarnated.
can tell I was slightly avoiding this.
Well, I mean, I don't mind seeing as I mean, again, I am still
uh,
sticking by my opinion I stated in the tier ranking video. I don't think A Forger's Love is the worst episode of FMAO 3, but it's still in the bottom of my tier rankings.
I I used to think episode 35 was worse. I strongly strongly take that statement well back after rewatching it so many times. Uh, Episode 4 is by far, without question, the worst episode of all three to me. Um, the entire experience. Okay, let's start with some positives because there are some positives in spite of this actually kind of being a 1 out of 10 for me, believe it or not. Uh, so okay, so the atmosphere is actually pretty good for just like a kind of a
For
Halloween
a pretty
type
mundane
experience.
episode, it definitely has some standout locations and feelings, whether it be the graveyard, the
like
dollhouse, whatever. It definitely makes you feel kind of on the tip of your toes, like Ed would be. So they got that going for it.
like the candles, stuff like the candles, being really well lit. Like I actually think Lust looks really cool here when she's in like the doll form. It's actually kind of interesting.
Yeah, like the
Uh,
episode definitely
uh
has some memorable locations that honestly feel like they'd fit right in with like a horror game or something. Slender the fucking arrival or whatever. I don't know. I don't
also, it's
know.
funny. Imagine how looks a lot like a guy from the other brothers arc, and as a result, I'm just like, what is going on? uh, like, so like Majahal's design, I guess it's fine for what it is. It's just, um,
I
I
mean, I
look
think
at
his
it
design
like,
actually perfectly fits his character. He's an old man who's
yeah,
way over his head. You can tell how tired
just
he is. I think it fits his character. I mean, not that his character's any great, mind you.
yeah, it's just the actual writing of the character is very
Like
how do I put
it's
this?
really basic. I mean, it kind of has to be for a one episode plot, but like
Oh yeah,
it feels
I'm a
like they're
bit
making a bigger deal out
seriously
of him than he really actually is.
okay. I'm a bit seriously start tearing into this episode because
Oh, here we go.
if even I'm noticing some issues, there's a problem. Uh, so okay, so he mentions that the Elric brothers' names that came in, even though he has there is no implication whatsoever. He doesn't even say that he heard about them from the news or anything. He literally just knows them because they know him. And then Edward, halfway through the episode, is like, "Oh, well, I don't know. I think he has a point." Like,
Wait, but wasn't it because like Majahal was someone that like Hohenheim was writing to or something for like
no,
the
yes,
letters?
but that is the exact thing that I have a problem with because that was literally that that is literally just like, dude, that plot point was so fake. It's not even funny. They, they tried to have Hohenheim because, oh yes, of course, we'll just have Hohenheim be the reason because
The
that's
father's
the only
absent. We don't know enough
character.
about him, so we can just sweep it under the rug. That's what you're probably thinking,
Well,
right?
it was like because we were like, oh, we need an O3 character to fill the space to make this not feel like a filler episode. It was like, well, you sure did that because apparently this guy is related to Hohenheim. Now, what does that mean in the grand scheme of things?
Basically
Absolutely
nothing.
nothing.
Literally, like I don't think they even explained like what his relation was to Hohenheim, besides maybe some like research or something. Like I honestly, I don't think they even
G.K.
covered like
Anyway did not explain that. He
yeah,
like
like
I paid
I,
attention. He did not explain that.
I and like it's even worse because like honestly, I wish Majahal like what would have been kind of interesting if they used the time with Majahal and the Elrics. Why not have Majahal talk about Hohenheim a little bit? Talk with the Eds about Hohenheim. I keep calling them the Eds. Like I feel like through Majahal we might have been able to learn a little bit about Hohenheim before he's actually on screen, but they really didn't do that.
So I like how we're just now finally doing one of the 403 episodes I dislike. And I'll say, even for the ones that don't like standards, this one, I just have so many issues with it from back to front, which is a shame because okay, here's my favorite thing about O3 in general. Not even just later on, by the way, like early on, like the very start of it.
Uh,
I think O3 has phenomenal pacing. I honestly really do feel that way. But episode 4 really tries to get in the way of that pacing because that does not feel like an episode where it's like the screen time is that well utilized at all since, well, it rushes past through everything without any kind of explanations.
One of the problems
Where,
I have with this episode, I'm sorry if I'm just going to briefly cut in here. I
mm,
have to mention this because you mentioned pacing. This episode, placement wise, I think the placement for the episode is about as good as it could be, being between the
yeah,
train and the,
yeah,
death of
for
Trisha.
sure.
The placement is actually surprisingly well thought out,
Yeah, I'll admit
but the
that.
actual content of the episode really doesn't complement that placement all that well. I mean, for one, the episode is very much just something the Elrics do on the way, and I don't dislike the idea of the Elrics,
Mm,
having an occurrence on their way to the train station before they, go to the, state alchemy exam and all that. I think that's actually a good way, because they don't just go to the train
mm,
instantly. It also gives them a chance, to, use their alchemy before having to deal with, the terrorists on the train and all that. It sounds fine, but the problem is the actual content within the episode is really just not that meaningful. I mean, aside from seeing Lust, and the I guess, excuse of Mahjal knowing Hohenheim, even though he like barely talks about it, which you really think he would, to try and empathize with the Elrics who just lost their mother. The bigger problem is that the episode itself, even on its own, just is not that interesting. I mean, we have a setup, with like, the
Yep.
undead, blah blah blah, Mahjal comes, burns the corpse and all that, but it's good that, Mahjal was trying to revive his wife, whatever, but his wife has been alive the whole time. The episode's build up and climax is just really not that interesting. I mean, even when you get to the moment where the big reveal happens, it's pretty obvious, not to mention the fact that, like, I didn't really feel that sorry for Mahjal. Maybe a little bit because, like, when he realizes it and he just kind of snaps, like, maybe, but that's not a high bar to clear. That, and like I
Also,
said, the actual climax of the episode is just not that interesting, even though this is Ed's technically first kill. But, like, I don't know. This episode is inoffensive. I mean, I've seen way worse episodes similar to its type. I mean, Water's Twilight Venom has two of them that don't add anything to the story. And at least this one is, phrased as like, something that happens on the way. So it's got that going for it. But really, though, I have absolutely no qualms saying that this episode is basically at the bottom of my tier list. Not the worst episode, that's going to be saved for another one. But this one just really, it just was not doing it for me. And I mean, you can definitely see why.
okay, so and the funny thing is, I'm not even close to finishing on this episode because I've got
Oh,
so
there's
many
more.
other things to talk about. Yeah, yeah, there's actually a lot more. So the guy in the hat, sorry, not the guy in the hat, the guy with the helmet thing, officer uniform in the train station, he is very, very poorly drawn and disproportioned for some reason. I don't know why. Uh, he's like he has a slight smirk to him, like he's a bit smiling. You can even see the nose is just barely a nose. It's really lame.
The nose
uh,
is barely a nose. That's
yeah.
funny.
So like that's something I'll give Majahal at least is like he doesn't like his design is fine and he doesn't look like disproportioned or anything. And it's actually somewhat memorable in a way. I just wish that he was actually like a proper character.
What did you think about the
Um
girl who like disguised herself as a boy or whatever? You know what I'm talking about.
I uh, uh mad.
Honestly,
uh
honestly, I had almost totally forgotten about her. Like that's
yeah.
it's
Uh
even dumber that like I don't know why Al slash Ed struggled with her. Like it's just I don't know. I didn't like her. I didn't feel very sorry for her. I mean, yeah, Maj Hall was gonna use her for the revitalization thingamabob, and I guess that's sympathetic. But like I don't know. I just didn't really care about her. Am I
yeah,
a
and
monster for
like
feeling that way?
the bulk of the episode is literally just Majahal sitting down and talking about how like he
Like, oh,
wants
my
to
wife is gone. Ah.
like that he doesn't want to turn down the request of Hohenheim and wants to resurrect his dead wife. It's the most generic freaking plot. Um
And it's like, it
and
doesn't help the fact that
then
we don't even get to learn that much about the wife. Whereas Trisha, we got to learn plenty about her both in episode 3 and even afterwards. The wife of Majahal, honestly, like, that's sort of the thing about, I want to revive this person. We have to have a reason to want or care about the person getting revived. Otherwise, it just feels forced.
yeah, and I like how the women show that that one woman that is a disguise by lust is like literally she just shows up and then she's like, mm, we need some bean jam all of a sudden, and then she just walks away. That's great.
Just
I'll admit
casually.
I enjoy that.
Honestly, like Lust is like the character in this episode who like it's weird how well Lust fits in with this episode with like the general
See,
unease and atmosphere. It's actually really interesting how well she fits in, even if the episode, like we both established, is really not that great.
see, the one thing I do think this episode has going for it is even though I personally just hate it, it does have a kind of fever dream appeal element. Because it's kind of just completely it. it's just completely like
Because of how different it feels, there's just some weird, strange appeal in it.
and like the writing and messages, they're like so on the nose, but it's like that's kind of what I enjoy about it at the same time,
It's
and
kind of
that gets
funny.
a
I'm that
really
way
good
with
laugh.
WATV because like some episodes in WATV feel so stupid and different, even though it doesn't really fit with what it's trying to go for. There is just some weird guilty pleasure slash appeal to it because, hey, it's just something you
Like,
kick back, and watch, laugh,
like
point fingers at, sigh a bit. I don't know. There's just
um,
something. I don't know. Maybe that's just a me thing, but like there are some episodes that like even though I'll readily admit they're not great, I can just kind of kick back and be like, yeah, ha ha, that's certainly an episode.
it's like it's like Majahal literally says at one point, like he got so full of himself that he literally said, "The spirits of the dead are sent up the fireworks to return them to heaven."
What? That's even dumber than like the freaking like Regina Barry in Turnabout Big Top was like when people die, they become a star. Like, uh,
Well, one thing I will say I like about this episode, actually, there is one thing I like, and this is actually legitimate. The rest were like the caveats. Um, Edward, Edward, kind of eating all fussy like, really like. I see him sometimes in all three doing stuff like that, and I'm glad to see his characterization is consistent.
he's just like pouting. He's like, I don't want to drink the milk.
It's funny. Uh, that's just a silly beast's rumor. It's just like Majahal's just like it's just like dialogue for the sake of dialogue, and it's just kind of unfocused, I guess.
Honestly, even
Um,
though and there we go. The dialogue in this episode, there actually is some decent dialogue, even if the actual content of the dialogue is not that great. At least the characters act the way I'd expect them to, so it's got that. But again, that's like not that big
Also,
of a bar
like
to clear.
the flashback is really bad because like all it serves is for like sh- for the disguise to show up right behind the tree and then just goes behind it again as if that's like an actual flashback, but it's not. It's just kind of showing, oh yes, that's oh yes, that's who she is. But he's not actually talking about who she is though.
Yeah,
Every time it's happening.
there's a lot of just writing problems with this episode that like I mean, I'm making it no secret, like I made it no secret. I've said that, in my video, like this episode, like I have seen some very, very bad anime episodes that try and do a similar thing, try and feel like they're connecting to the main plot, but ultimately they really don't add that much. And while Forger's Love is like honestly not even that bad of an example on several animes I've seen, hell, it's actually one of the better examples, but because FMA just has such a high bar to clear and there's a lot of standards for it, it's the biggest outlier. That's the problem because of what it is. Like honestly, if this were in any other anime, I think this episode could probably fly as just a one-off episode. I mean, if it's in WATV, it actually would work out pretty well. But because like this is the thing, this is just not the right series for this episode to be in. And
Yeah,
like you
so
said, the
like
whole fever dream part of it, like that's I think that I think is like the best way to describe it. It's a fever dream. It just doesn't feel like it's in the right series.
yeah, so that part where the girl is like saying that it's like it's like I've I've asked Majahal, but I won't, but like he won't do anything, and that's related to the line that's saying about how he's like, oh, if you're alchemist, please do something about this. It's just like they had to force that in here for it to make a connection, and
And
it's just
ultimately, he was the one that burned the doll anyway. So like, what was
it's
even the
not
point?
thoughtful. Like there's just I don't like that kind of like lack of thoughtful writing. It just like completely takes me out of it.
It's like, you know what they were trying to do? They were trying to make Majahal like Big Boss in Metal Gear Solid. Sends you on a fake mission only to reveal that he's actually been like the bad guy the whole time. It's so weak. Like, one, not only is it incredibly obvious he's up to no good, but also like again, he's just not that interesting of a character. And like, okay, I get it. One-off characters that only have one episode, to like actually explore them. Typically, they're not going to be that layered, but like, I at least expect something to latch onto. With Mahjong, there really isn't that much there. I mean, there's maybe a few things, but it's just not that easy for me to appreciate.
And here's the thing: even though I praised Ed earlier, he has some problems in this episode. Unfortunately, for one, okay, I mentioned about how uh, you know how one of my favorite things about Edward is like he's like you know like that he finds things out very easily. He's
Yeah,
almost like a detective.
like Roy, he's got good intuition. He's quick on his feet. He's
He's
adaptable.
like he's like literally a detective who's not a detective. Um,
He's a sharp
so
cookie. He's a sharp cookie.
yeah, yeah. So it's like if, but like this episode tries is like because Shaw had to give the writing anyway. It's like, well, he's obviously wrote it and went like, well, Edward, he's obviously not thought about, that he that he would be fine enough to figure out to literally figure out that that maybe what Majahal was doing wasn't exactly
Yeah, it's like he finds
wa-
it out, but like he finds it out way slower than his other more genius
yeah,
experts. And I get it. I get it. He's still a kid at this point, this is like right after, the mother died. So I get it his mentalities, his mental skills would not be as sharp, but like I don't know, it didn't feel very natural, especially when like honestly, if I was there at like the first sight of Majahal or,
and it's
maybe a
like,
few others, I feel like I would have deduced it a little bit faster.
and also all of a sudden near the end of the episode, he acts like he knows everything about the situation when he doesn't. Like
Even
he
I
acts like
don't
he
know
knows the
everything about the
entire story.
situation. So
It's
like
like
you get this disconnect.
literally like he goes from acting like he knows nothing to like one scene later, right? In the whole in the Majahal building, he's like, well, you see, this is what your wife would have wanted, and then it's like, how do you know that, Ed? You don't know anything about this backstory.
It's like it's really weird too because like I see potential. Like honestly, this episode is not something that was doomed from the start. I mean, honestly, if it were rewritten and I don't know, maybe they made some less
I think it
crushing
needed more
decisions,
fleshing out.
huh?
I think it needed more fleshing out. Like if they
Yeah, like
actually
honestly,
like
like this
more
episode
thought.
in its base concept honestly could have worked really well, but I mean, given off of what we've seen, evidently that's not the case.
Yeah, and as a result, it's kind of making the pacing a little scattered, especially because it ends up being a little forgettable in the long run. So like, and my other problem with Edward here is he says, um, because he's actually sexist twice towards this girl. He says, "What about
What?
you? If you're a girl, why don't you at least dress a little like one?" And then at the end, he's like, "You were definitely much prettier when you dress like a paper boy." Yeah, I've always hated that. I've always hated that. That never sat right with me.
I don't know. Like the first time he's all like, "Wait, you're a girl?" I understand that reaction. I mean, I understand the reaction. Like, I mean,
No,
given,
that part fine.
but it's
It's
like
more
it's
so
like
just
I
that
understand maybe he was trying to tease, as a way of getting back at her for earlier. But like, there's other ways to go about that.
it's just more so that it's like
It feels
it's
like a
almost like
lame
he just
last minute attempt at comedy just to kind of mend their.
yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like
and it's like he's trying to like shame her for
not
being
even
the way
shame
she
her.
is.
Like I don't
And
think
that's
Ed was trying to shame her. The writers just wanted to crack a bit of
like
lightheartedness before the episode ended.
I literally said the moment, like I literally spelled it out to you.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, I don't know. I don't know how the writers were intending to write it. So ultimately, I'm not really one to say. Maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but it has been a while. I really have to go back and watch both adaptations because I haven't seen either of
Because like
her.
the exact wording, right, is like
It's like,
it's like okay, what about you? If you're a girl, why don't you at least dress a little like one? It's like that's shaming her for the way she dresses. So it's like here's the thing. I'm not saying it's inherently bad, but it doesn't even fit Ed's character though. Ed doesn't usually do stuff like that. Just saying.
yeah, I mean, he's short tempered, but I don't think he would be like. I feel like Ed is a bit more sensitive than
Yeah. Like Edward. Edward. Keep in mind, this is the same character that helped. That literally paid Sheska for her skill of
and
with
also
the
helped out Rose, mind you. So like,
mm,
and I get it. I
with
get it that
the
he's younger. I get it that he's younger here, so he's probably not as mature, but it still doesn't fit him for who he is, age or not.
yeah. Uh, and it's like he was still quite young when he was with Sheska too, and he, when he was saying because I believe for the first 25 episodes he's still relatively, not fully matured yet. It's like
Yeah.
um, and then the Sheska episode, it's like literally like you know what? Even in Mining Town, episode 9, uh, he
He literally gives
saves
the people
the
back the
mine.
rights to the village just to have one
Yeah,
night at the inn.
yeah, and here's the thing: he didn't have to pay Sheska for her skill in photographic memory, but she did, but he did.
Yeah.
So that's an admirable thing about Edward. I just don't see how this fits in with that. So,
Well, I think we've covered episode 4 quite thoroughly. Anything else you want to say
yo,
before we
Quinn,
move on to 5?
I'm getting near the end. I'm getting
Oh,
near
you're
the end.
not done yet? There's more. Oh man, you're really
There's a little
driving your
more.
fangs into this one.
Oh, I really hate this episode. I, I think this episode is disrespectful to all three, honestly. I think this is stupid. Honestly, like,
Disrespect!
you know what, Quinn? I'll come out and say it. I like the other NOA episodes a lot more than this one. A lot more.
Hey, I don't blame you. I mean, honestly, I can get behind some of the things in it, but I do agree. It's ultimately just like I don't like using the word filler because it's like a bit of an awkward term to use, but it
I
certainly
wouldn't
feels like one.
actually. Yeah, it's not actually filler. It's just
It
if
feels like
there's
it.
one, if there's the one that's the closest to being that, it would be this one.
Yeah, like you don't have to be filler to still feel like one.
Yeah, uh, but like you do also get a moment right at the start where it actually does show substantial content before the intro as well. So it's kind of worth not ignoring that
True that.
either. So it's like that whole climax is like really funny because it's like the pacing just like okay for a
It
lot
was
of this
so
episode it's actually
slow, and then
been
it just
kind of
unnaturally speeds up, and like
yeah
Majol just dies on his own sword, and it's just over again. It's
yeah
zigzagged.
like the pacing was non-existent for the first like 15 minutes but then everything's like suddenly like lightning speed at the climax.
Like literally, like I was literally thinking that the fight scene could be redeemable because I'm the biggest sucker for action in anime. Literally, if you have good fight scenes, you've basically won me over. But this, it ends in seconds.
I will say at least the firework effect is kind of decent uh, at the end. But like, so like they want to go even further with that Majahal stuff, where it's like, and here's the thing: it doesn't get any less vague. They do oh, dude Toshiki with these flashbacks. He does another flashback where he goes, "No matter how many years pass since Karen's death, my scars will not heal." And it's like, I don't know anything about her. Can you stop flashbacking to
It's like you
stuff
could
I know
use these
nothing about?
flashbacks, to actually give me a reason to care about Karen or
Yeah,
whatever his name was. And
yeah,
like,
because this is the only time where Karen's ever going to come up. Keep in mind.
yeah, it's like I honestly, not only does it make Mahjahal like it makes his love feel really obsessive, which yes is the whole point. I get it, but like I don't know. It's like, and this is sort of the thing, I have to mention this. The whole I lost my wife or I lost this character I love cliche, normally that sort of thing works because typically series will, give you a reason, especially if it's a villain motivation. But as the more times I see it, the more I realize that series that try and do that sort of motive have to make the character that the person that, is trying to, fight for or do evil things for, you have to make the person like you have to care about them for that motive to actually work. And Mahjahal is just not it. That and what sort of name is Mahjahal? Like, why
Mahjong.
Mahjahal? I mean, it sounds kind of neat, I guess, but like, what does it even
I think it has
mean?
a
Is there like a
style to it at least.
yeah? It's
But
like it's got a good
yeah,
ring to it, but like Mahjahal, I don't know. Like, does it mean something? Is there a translation? I have
I
no
don't know.
clue.
I don't know. I've never heard that name in my life until then.
Well,
Uh,
that's yet
uh,
another
like
mystery we'll have to deduce. Oh yeah, that's another thing. The mystery. This
also
episode tries to be a mystery, with like who's the culprit, what are the dolls? The mystery is not that interesting either. It can't even compel me on that.
Also, wanting to create something that was close to Karen is like the most basic plot you can make. Is like yes, okay. So because Edward and Al at the start, it's like he wants to kind of make something similar to that, where they can show they can show that he wants to bring her back through the power of alchemy, just like how they did that. So they're actually just doing this again. Uh, but the thing is that like Toshiki, I think he should have just like cooked it more. Like,
It's
did
like
this even have to be one episode? Like, this actually could have been multiple episodes. This could have been an arc.
honestly, yeah, it could have
Um,
been, and honestly, it like he's saying, it could still have worked. Like, here's the thing. I think this episode has like so many like other things going on, like the girl, the fireworks ceremony, the dolls, Mahjahal, the backstory. If they just wanted to focus on Mahjahal without like the girl who dresses like a paper boy or whatever Ed said, the fireworks and all that. If they just focused on Mahjahal, they could have made it compelling, even tying into Hohenheim more, and it all could have been done within one episode. But this episode had no clue what it wanted to be. Did it want to be a mystery? Did it want to be horror, a tragic romance? Did it want to be action? It just had no clue what specifically it
Quinn,
was trying to tackle.
There's a line delivery I really love, which is "You're sick," and then like Ed says to Majahal, it's like "You're sick," and then Majahal's like, "No, I just love Karen." It sounds off. It sounds
Get a
very
body
off.
pillow, Mahjahal. If you really want to cuddle with Karen so badly, get a body pillow.
Just like a little more. Uh, there's like one more thing I need to cover.
Okay.
So, oh yeah, oh yeah. No, okay. So here's what I was gonna talk about earlier, right?
Yeah.
So you know how I mentioned about Edward like pretending like he understands everything about the situation.
Yeah.
Well, the way this plays out is like receive the girl's spirit and smile upon me this time without fail, Karen, and then the kid's like, no, stop. And then Ed is like, stop, Majahal, you don't understand a thing. And then it's like, stop, Majahal, you don't understand a thing. But it's like, Edward didn't even do anything during the scene. Like, he didn't look anything up or anything. No, he just comes out with, you don't understand a thing. Immediately after, not knowing anything about the situation, still at the end, he only knows it because the writer wrote
Needs him
him
to
to.
know it for the sake of the plot.
Like, what is this writing?
I mean, I get it's early series, but you still have to have flow and consistency to it. It's like, oof. Like that is this episode in one word.
Like,
Oof.
directly, like, okay, yes, Edward knows that her memory is lost, but he literally, anyway, he's not supposed to know, like how
Like, how did
that
he even find
happened.
out that her memory was lost anyways? He's not a
Like,
doctor.
he's not supposed to know exactly how that played out, though. So how can he talk as if he fully grasps the situation if he only has surface level details?
Yeah, again, that goes hand in hand with the mystery elements. It's just not a very well thought out mystery that gets wrapped
Yeah.
up just because the plot needs it to get wrapped up.
Like, like Edward is just having a speech by this point, and I'm just
Yes!
I'm like, Edward is having a speech about something he knows barely anything about.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
just like, this literally, this is what just made me like stop caring altogether. Um, so
Well,
yeah, I stand by what I said. I think this is a one for me. Uh,
for
but
me, I mean, I
otherwise,
still stand by what I said too. It is staying in F tier. It is not my least favorite episode. I mean, I can look past a few things because it's early series, it's filler. But yeah, I'm not gonna give it anything more than well what we've already given it.
hey, I just want to subtly hint something to the audience real quick. I love his least favorite episode. I'm the biggest fan.
Well, so let's move on to episode 5, the one that
Quinn,
actually, believe it or not,
Quinn,
was my very first
I thought
exposure
I'd
to Fullmetal Alchemist.
Quinn, I thought I'd inject some, little, little, just little comedy hints for the sake of
Hey,
it.
it's fine. It's fine. I'm always dropping snarky lines. I literally told Mahal to get a body pillow. Not that I ever want to see a body pillow of Karen. Somebody, please do not make one of those. She's not that pretty, if I'm
Well,
being honest.
the thing about O3 is that episode 4, I think that even if you don't hate it, for O3 standards, it's like it's like you get the first 3 and then it's like episode 4, it's like drop,
It
ditch,
feels
drop, and
so different from what you were like led to believe and what you've seen prior
yeah.
to it that you kind of scratch your head at it.
Yeah, but the cool thing about this is we're past episode 4 now, and O3 actually picks up immediately
Yeah, honestly, I mean,
again
I made it
after.
no secret that this episode was not only the very first episode of Full Metal Alchemist I ever saw, for the record. I did not watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood or O3 during the sibling anime tradition of 2005 or 2005 through 2015. But I did see this episode and it really stood out to me. Now, I had a massive hard on for trains as a kid because I was simple minded. But honestly, like, this episode more than makes up for the slowdown of episode 4. It's also weird how it has
Yeah.
like two different names, like Rush Automail in like Japan and the man with the mechanical arm
Mhm.
in English. I don't know
Yeah,
why it was changed around like that, but something interesting
yeah,
to note wording.
that's interesting. So, uh, okay, let's immediately dive. We'll cover the structure, but first I want to immediately just dive into the point of why I originally wasn't actually a big fan of this, but it has grown on me over time to the point where I can look at this episode and go, "What an impressive work of art." So,
And it's not
okay.
even in Brotherhood either, so there's that.
Funny thing is, it's in the manga too.
Yeah, it's like I
It's in
understand
the
they wanted to
manga,
cut
but
back
not in
on a few
Brotherhood.
things, but still.
Hmm?
I understand they wanted to cut back on a few things because the brother developers
Hmm.
probably assumed people knew what
Yeah.
happened anyways, but still.
Yeah, so the bulk of this episode is about the villain the villain guy.
His name
I
is
think I
Bald.
remember
His name is Bald.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
I actually remember. I'm
yeah,
surprised.
sorry. I took a minute to remember the exact name because sometimes I
Yeah,
just forget because I remember not originally even knowing his name in the first place.
yeah.
So Bald. Okay, so Bald. I used to have an issue with him claiming to be in the military, and just
His
me
motive in general. I
by
mean,
default, like as in like I'm so like I used to have a problem with me expecting to believe that he's connected to the military because why not? But in the grand scheme of things, I'll admit I understand that that was entirely on me because that's not actually a problem necessarily. It's just something where I'm like, it's just something that could have been expanded upon, but not like, is that really a writing issue? Like
it's
the
really
fact
funny.
that it's not a
I'll have to
problem.
mention something when we get more into Bald later. Um, but while you're on the topic of Bald and the episode itself, I mean, structurally speaking, this episode is mostly just a long action sequence. And you know me,
Yeah,
I'm a sucker for action, and a train is
yeah,
a pretty good set piece for action. I mean, yes, it's cliche, terrorists on a train. It's sort of a thing that's been used in many action movies, but it's
yeah,
because
but
it works and there's a
it's
great speed to it. I really
yeah,
like how,
it
again, Ed
stands
is
out.
very clever. I know you mentioned how before, like, Ed is really
It
good on the fly. He's super smart. He's great here in that regard.
it stands out in subtle ways, I would say. Uh, and either the manga or all three, funnily enough.
Yeah.
I think it legitimately does like it it does a lot with just a simple train concept, and there's nothing wrong with just having your generic train plots, like that are
Yeah.
just
And because it's,
kind of
and also because it's on the train, it's good narratively speaking because it's on the way to the capital or the
yeah,
state,
yeah,
the
yeah,
central state. So, like, it
yeah.
actually serves the plot in that
It's
purpose.
it's almost kind of world building. So like you get you get there's what was I gonna say? Saying that so okay, keep in mind by the way, this is the first time. Now, yes, Roy does appear in the flashback, but this is the first proper introduction to the military,
And we also get to
especially
see him at the very end actually use his flame alchemy, which was awesome.
yeah, and uh, especially in the manga where it's just there right off the bat. Well, what more so mean is that because the mother backstory doesn't come out later, like this is the actual introduction. But here it's in the flashback with Roy, but he's not the proper introduction because you don't get Maze Hughes until now. This is where you get the more of the actual military, and I do like the way they build it up for contextual
Oh yeah, that's
reasons.
right. Mace Hughes was like on like the phone in the train. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and he also he actually you know comes to Ed's rescue at one point
And he actually
above
was very
the
clever. I mean, he eluded capture by the terrorists, and they noticed that he was not using the phone. So you got to give credit to Mace Hughes for being smart too.
yeah, Maze is more a Chad here more than ever, man. I love him.
Even more of a Chad than the time he put a fucking dagger in Envy's forehead before he got
Yes,
killed. I
yeah.
swear I fucking hate Envy, but that's not a topic for now. That's gonna come way later. I have some things to say about that stupid transforming bitch. Just you wait.
So, what was I gonna say? So, okay, so like the villain motivation being placed on the military, like, okay, yes, it, it could have been expanded upon, but you wanna know what? That's like a really tiny amount of screen time of this episode. I won't even lie with you.
That, and
And
honestly, I think it's actually better being this way because I mean, we
yeah,
know what the Amestris state military, is doing behind the
mhm,
scenes. So not having Bald fully expand upon it and him getting silenced before he can, I think if anything, that actually enhances the plot. Since I mean, Ed doesn't exactly trust the
yeah,
military. I mean, he never does. and
Um,
Bald
I
showing
think
that Ed is not the only one like that. It's really funny. Bald is a lot like Isaac McDougal in some regard, where he actually knew
right.
what the military was doing and tried to foil them. It's actually kind of
I
ironic that I'm
think
now just noticing this.
I think the end of the episode makes us even better since, well, the military actually like take Bald and so for you know for obvious reasons,
Yeah,
being
not
that
just because
you
he's a
know
criminal, but also to silence him before he can leak out anything they don't want him to leak out.
oh yeah, and they also want to find out stuff from him. So
Yeah.
this was a perfect interrogation tool.
Yeah, and honestly,
Um,
like and again, I actually like it how Bald shows that Ed is not the only one who uses automail. I mean, that's another thing actually I think
yeah,
O3
that was
did that I
cool
really liked.
actually.
There's more like
That
automail, I feel like was more integrated into the plot of O3, whereas in Brotherhood it was Ed and it was like Ed, Lon Fawn, and like the one girl in like the Rush Valley or whatever it was. I like it here how we have more people and like we just there's more bells and whistles to automail. And
okay.
for a character like Bald to have it, I think it's actually kind of fascinating.
So I stand by. I stand by that. That it could be expanded upon in writing. However, I do think he's underrated, and I believe you said that um that you really liked his design or something at one
Yeah, I
point.
mean, dude's got an
His
eye patch.
eye.
I also like it how he keeps his arm covered
Mhm.
until Ed actually confronts him. And
Yeah,
like it
I
was foreshadowed
actually.
too. I mean, he shot that one dude through the ear and we didn't see the barrel of his gun. We just see like smoke coming from his sleeve. I like it how it was very
Mhm.
well foreshadowed. I mean, he blocks a knife with what looks like his bare arm. I like the reveal of him having
Mhm.
automail, just like that. And it doesn't feel like an asshole either.
Yeah, that is actually one of my favorite villain designs in the series. Because it's just it perfectly fits the whole big and tough guy
Yeah,
thing
he looks gruff,
that
his voice fits, and like honestly, like you just see this guy and you know he means trouble. I mean,
also
tattered coat, missing
like
an eye, grizzly beard, no arm,
yeah
like
like
what more do you need?
he literally has like the eye patch on him.
Yeah, and it's not like
So
King Bradley's where it looks like an actual eye patch. It's like he just tied a cloth over his eye because he was that desperate alongside the other terrorists. Again, good
yeah,
connection to the narrative.
yeah, that's actually really thoughtful. Like it's almost like design as part of the writing kind of design.
Yeah,
So
like you see
I
this
really
guy, and
like
like
that.
even though the terrorists, on the train are like armed, we see Bald is not like they're not like armed like the military who have like way more like intricate weaponry. These dudes just like they just look like they look like thugs. They look like thugs. What else can I say?
Yeah, so this episode is getting an 8 or a 9 for me. Uh, so
And I also
I
like it how they actually beat Bald. Like honestly, the actual confrontation with Bald, like the actual fight with him himself is short. But I think that makes sense because most of the trouble was just getting to him and making sure all the
well,
hostages on the train were safe.
here's the thing: the fight was short, yeah,
But it made
but it was,
sense why.
and it was also fire. The animation was a banger.
Yeah, like you just see him lock arms with Ed, and I get the impression of a power struggle, like this
Well,
big burly dude trying to press down into this kid, and Ed, just with all of his might, just Deesh!
also you'll notice like the background outside the train looks very nice with like the water and like
Yeah,
the
and when they're going
flare
across the
effect.
bridge, the tunnel, and all that,
Yeah.
like I said, with the backgrounds, they feel alive.
Yeah, and like the actual train part, like I like how all three presented the water flooding section. I think that was done very well.
Again, another one of
Where like the train
Ed's
flooded.
clever plays right there.
Yep. Oh yeah, I love the gag as well, which is in the manga. No, the manga and all three of like you know the bit where he's got like the head is like the bell thing.
Oh
That
yeah,
was
the intercom. Prepare for some
yeah.
turbulence.
Yes, that was fire. That
It's
was an
such an Ed
amazing.
thing to do to like have like the little alchemy like make it in the shape of his face. That's funny. That's funny. I love little details like that. It takes me
Yeah,
back to the Tom and Jerry days where like a whistle would like grow a mouth and be like, "Choo!" It just reminds me of that.
and I like how the episode starts off, in like a very believable way, because it's like, like of course Edward's gonna call Roy at this point. It's a natural progression of events. It
Yeah.
is like really, like this is why it's like because like I know some say it's like that like all three is just stretching out events, but no, I would say it's fleshing it out. Like
Yeah, I mean, just
just
because it's
fleshing.
extending things does not mean the time on the content is being wasted. Far from it. It's
Yeah, no,
enhancing
I
it.
think the screen time's great, and I actually think the pacing's an improvement. Yes, it's slower, but it's earned low.
Yeah,
It's
and it makes when
earned.
bigger highlights or faster scenes happen, it makes it pop out more. I mean, there are times in Brotherhood where, faster scenes pop out more too, but here, because there's more slow stuff, it makes it when something faster does happen stick out to me a little bit more.
Yeah, and it's also why like I don't have a problem with a lot of the more emotional moments where because they give me a lot of time to
Yeah, because they're
kind of
spent on
take
slower
it in.
scenes with characters, you get to know who they are outside of just big fight scenes. It makes you really get to see who they are as people and by characters, and you just feel more connected to them.
Yeah, because like the first 25 episodes of all three, right? It's like you know I watched it for the first time, and I can tell you for a fact that I personally definitely cared about the characters because those were extensively well earned screen time as they were.
Hmm.
Like and keep in mind, it's like Ofri will add as many scenes as it wants since it's its own canon and it's trying to like add little original events to be like really expansive. Like that part where Maze Hughes and Roy Mustang are like hanging out at the bar and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Um, early on,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, that wasn't in Mangahood, and like as a result, it's like
It's
and
like you
like
really feel the connection between these characters.
and
Actually,
it's like
that's something I
okay,
like about the military is that they don't just feel like soldiers who
Glenn,
are like soldiers; they feel like comrades in arms.
so like so I'm saying that, and don't get me wrong, like my intention is not to compare these two, but like I just me mentioning it is just more so acknowledging how things play out, and I'm saying that all three, in terms of unique things that it does that I like, um, is that it'll expand on things that were introduced on, you know, a base level, like it'll expand on a thing say that was like one or two chapters, and then it'll include a lot of stuff, to just make me care a lot more, because I
Yeah,
get a lot more time with Hughes. I have 24 episodes worth of Hughes, 25 episodes worth of Maze Hughes, so of
yeah, and like
course I'm
O3
gonna
does this
just
for
keep
other
on
characters too. I mean, Shao and Nina, they get
the.
2 episodes, and you know who else gets more episodes too? Sheska.
Yeah, and keep in mind that Shu and Nina also come back later on
Oh
too.
yeah, they
Well,
do. And that's the thing, like I think there are decisions O3 made that were actually beneficial. Some of which I'd even argue were better than Brotherhood. I mean, for one, I think Greed's death in O3 is way more impactful than Greeling. Because if I'm being honest,
also,
huh?
also his action sequence was like way more memorable.
Like honestly, I'm not gonna lie with you. The actual fight with Greed, I mean like
Oh,
the
it's so good.
Bradley fighting Greed in Brotherhood, a good fight, but for what is effectively the death of the original Greed, it felt just a little swift. Whereas here, Ed fighting Greed twice, might I add, first in like the Chimera hideout, second in like the Dante mansion. Both fights were really good. And Greed dying, like I don't know, something like I could really feel the hurt in his voice, and Ed feeling guilty after that, like it actually made a lot of sense. And I actually I mean, hot take, I think O3 Greed is more sympathetic than Greeling just because, well, there really was no way for him to truly be free when you get down to it. I mean, he
Yeah.
was going to die. He had both enemies in the state military and the other homunculus, so he really did not stand a chance, and it really makes me feel bad for him.
I actually like how Greed was handled in all three
Like,
since,
I
well,
actually prefer
was,
O3 Greed entirely. I'm not even kidding
yeah,
on that
because like
one.
he was. Here's the thing. Yes, he was introduced quite late, but the screen time that he does have is very substantial and is very focused. You know,
Yeah,
like you
and
can.
also when he dies, like there's a lot
Mhm.
more feeling of a loss. Like this guy, or well, like this homunculus never truly got to have what he wanted. And there's like, and the fact that he realizes this and he tells Ed, kill the other homunculi, including Dante, kind of shows that he kind of came to accept that. Like, I'm actually surprised how they humanized Greed in this version without Greeling, might I add.
Yeah, and it's kind of like all three actually made it. Like an arc. Like a sub arc that's kind of like tied to many of the things going on, but in a
Yeah.
way that actually does make sense. Like
Yeah.
it
And
really
and
does.
keep in mind with his his writing slash introduction being different because of Dante, they made it work
Mhm.
really well.
Yeah,
I mean, him being
yeah, yeah,
imprisoned in
for
Lab
sure.
5 makes so much sense.
Not to mention the building is like literally next door to Dante's mansion. It's great. It's great. I love it.
True.
Also, that location was really unique, but we'll
Yeah,
save
like
that
Lab
for
5, honestly,
34.
a really good place. I mean, the actual cell with Greed with like all the transmutation circles and the skull over him, and he's just like hunched over. Like, goddamn, that feels like a prison cell right there.
Seriously, some of those locations, man, really memorable.
Yeah,
I
even for
think.
scenes that like don't like use them that much or they don't have that much screen time, they still pop out to me. Again,
Here's the thing.
alive backgrounds.
All right, I'm gonna go on in one of my more all free in general tangents.
Okay.
Uh, so I think that all free has very underrated world building because here's the thing: when people mention world building in anime, they're always like, "Oh yes, well, there's a lot of it." Yeah, well, see, they do this thing to like make this location important. But here's the thing: if you're only like writing a location and then you have to you have to add writing on top of that because well because that's just what you have to do. It's
Yeah.
like no, I prefer having like proper reasons to care about the locations I'm visiting rather than just a throwaway story that I could easily ignore.
Or
Like
or
no,
even worse, if they like introduce a location and then in the middle of it they have this big lore dump to explain it, like, oof, that would be
I'm like I want you to keep in mind, right? Like I don't have an issue with Brotherhood's world building either, other than like in one or two instances that I've discussed a few times, being like some like not outright, but I have some issues with Rush Valley and Briggs. However, right, like okay, the thing I have with all three's world building is like yes, it is more limited, but that doesn't mean it's worse
Yeah,
necessarily
it doesn't
because
come to its detriment because it can be more focused with it having to focus on a smaller scale of things while still feeling
well,
big in its own right.
yeah. Because I would still very much say all three feels like a very kind of grand scale
Yeah,
kind of
grand
journey.
scale. That's a good way of putting it. It can still be grand even without a big world-ending scheme like there was in, well, Brotherhood.
Yeah, because like keep in mind like a lot of the second halves, are kind of like in mansions and stuff, and that's kind of like that's kind of like you know it's kind of like you're focusing on something that you're used to. If you are living in one of those buildings, yeah, but that doesn't mean that something epic can't happen in them. If you know
Yeah,
what I
I
mean,
mean,
right?
literally, the entire climax of O3 takes place in an underground city. Like,
That is pretty sick, yeah, for
yeah, that
sure.
is pretty sick. And honestly, what I like is, unlike Xerxes, where it's like a lost city or whatever in history, like I mean, okay, yes, there's plenty to go off with the Xerxes. I actually do appreciate the lore with Hohenheim and all that. It's
Mm,
really cool. But the underground
mm,
city being underneath, the central state military metrics thing, it actually is really good because it flips everything on its head. You're like, oh my God, the state military has been hiding this the whole time. And like, it brings up a lot of questions, which it does answer. But it's like, again, it's like, it kind of makes you think, oh my God, like you see like just what they are able to hide.
yeah. Because my thing is, right, like if you're just writing more locations for the sake of more locations, right? It's like uh, that doesn't really mean anything to me because I want to actually care about the locations I'm going to, and I do in both FMAs, by the way. I do like I like the world building in both, for the most part. Like I legitimately think that being limited to something like Central City and or Lior in O3, I think it works.
Yeah.
I legitimately think it works because you're doing, it's kind of like a less is more kind of thing,
Yeah, I mean, with Brotherhood, there just because it has more locations doesn't mean they were expanded upon that much. I mean, Briggs, we didn't really get to learn too much about like the Ying Lao kingdom, like because
For
there was
sure.
more locations, they had to juggle more, and it was not nearly as like the attention distribution
Mm.
didn't feel as balanced.
Yeah, I do love Brotherhood's locations. By the way, I just,
You
I
want
do
more, you want more, and honestly,
yeah,
who
yeah,
could
yeah.
really blame you? You'd
Like
get along
I
great
do
with
think,
Greed.
like I do think Brotherhood's world building is still like pretty solid. Especially kind of like that desert area in
Yeah,
part
Xerxes.
part two. Yeah, that's a really cool one. Uh, but it's like like it's like, and here's the thing: Brotherhood has good world building because I care about the locations, not because it has more locations.
Yep.
Like, and I just get the impression that it's like Brotherhood is like treated so much better world building because, well, uh, it's it's like it's got a much bigger world, which like I disagree with because it's like, I mean, okay, and here's the thing too. It's like it's not even that different since you're still limited to Central City. Like you're still you're. Here's the thing. Most of the time, you are still on the outskirts of Central City.
Yep.
It is limited theming, but both do a good job of like generally fleshing these locations out and giving me a reason to care about the locations I'm going to. I think that is done well most of the time in both FMAs, honestly.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree.
and I think it's unfortunate that all freeze world building just gets completely forgotten about by since I notice there is an attention. You know what I will say. Anyway, anyway, right? You want to know what? I even like his world building. I actually think he's a pretty good world builder, believe it or not. For the episodes he did do, of course. Um, I I like Poseidon. I like the Phantom Thief location. I like I like I mean, okay, I don't really care for the Owl Detour to be honest, but I do like where,
Like
the
how they
idea,
connected it to the story and the lore,
yeah, like
regardless of it not being from the source material. They actually provided a believable explanation.
yeah, like the idea of where they went to, like it was not lost on me. I think, and I think anyway was also like pretty damn good at that actually. Funnily enough, by the way,
Yeah,
my
they made the
favorite
most of
is
it.
my favorite is actually Poseidon, from your least favorite episode.
I mean, okay, it's not a Phantom Thief is not a terrible episode. I made it no secret. Like I said, I think it's a fine episode. I think it just I'll have to get to that more when we inevitably come to that. But I think now that we've reached the hour 30ish mark, we should probably wrap up the recording. Is there anything
Okay,
else you want to say before I end the podcast?
yeah, I've still got a few more things.
Sure,
Uh,
sure, go ahead.
this one's really all. This one, I'm actually, I'm actually caring. Like, I think when episode 4 came along, that was just the spark I needed to just start going off on, off on stuff about the show. It's like, let's go.
In the words of a
Um,
dot chief on Persona 4, all it took was a little push.
yep, the episode for sure pushed me. I'll give it credit and
It
respect for
did.
that. At least.
It did.
So like, and like immediately you'll notice, right? And like episode 5, right? It's like the animation, you know, it's like, oh,
It
it's
really pops
it's
out.
back. Yeah, it's back to being completely sick already. And it's like, because here's the thing about episode 4, it wasn't like there were instances of bad animation. It didn't look too bad overall. Um, there were even some nice looking stuff, like the fireworks and the flame. The presentation could have been better. Some of the characters were poorly drawn, like I discussed. Not Majahal. Majahal actually looks fine, to be honest.
It's his
Um,
character.
yeah, yeah. He was he was actually drawn in the natural way. He actually had a properly developed face for sure.
Hmm.
Um. Oh. Oh. Okay. No. We need to discuss this.
Oh,
There's something else I really like about the train episode.
go on.
Uh, Edward. Okay. Something that I really like about early O3 is, some of those like light-hearted moments of like, just like complete wholesomeness. Uh, One instance is, where the music plays that goes like
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
yeah. I love that track, but on top of that track playing, you have that one girl on the train,
Who's like looking at Ed
during
like,
the
wow, are
time.
you like a knight or something?
I love that scene. That is one of my favorite scenes of all three.
It's
That is just
wholesome.
like
It's wholesome.
I just also love the part where her mother like is just she grabs her and she's all like, no, it just love, man, love,
It's
just
literally
complete
that.
love.
It's funny because that's something Philo would do from Shield Hero. She'd be like, "Ooh," she like stare like all the sparkly eyes, all curious. Like,
Yeah, it's like there now, Marin. That's enough already. It's like, oh, it's so cute. And like also, obviously, Mace uses a Chad in this episode, like we discussed. I like that he phones, and then the line about babies. When Riza says, "Babies aren't born in just." Oh, like the comedy of this episode is great. Like
Yeah, and
honestly,
it's
like
even
all
used in
three.
the action where he's like, "Take off the helmet," and Ed's like, "Look!" and just bashes him as he turns his head. Like, it's used really well, actually.
And I'll immediately tell you, I think all three is a funny show. Like I
Yeah,
have
they got
laughed
good comedy.
many
I mean,
times.
okay, again, Brotherhood has more comedy, but I think O3's jokes land better ultimately.
But yeah, it's just well, here's the thing, right? Like Brotherhood has more comedy, but as I've discussed, I have issues with the tone there. So
Yeah,
it's a little
like here's the thing. I think Brotherhood's like the jokes of Brotherhood, like they are similar in essence to O3's, but the actual timing and placement of the jokes is just a little bit less consistent. I mean, some of them do hit their marks. I mean, I especially love the honestly, Roy has I think Roy's humor is actually better in Brotherhood. Not to say he
Rise
doesn't
is
have
good.
great humor here, but just something I figured I'd point out.
Nah, Rise is good in Brotherhood for sure. Uh, it just like
It's in
I
general.
noticed
It's
there
in
was
general.
I noticed there was a few times in Brotherhood season one where it was like there were some times where it handled it okay, but then there was other times like the Cornello episode, or there was a later one. There was a later one that really angered me, which was the one where they're having the action scene in the building. Um, and then here's the thing, right? I would be fine if it was just one throwaway line, that's bound to happen. But no, like I'm saying, they go full out gag mode, tentacle mode during the one of the most intense action scenes, and it is they did not think through the tone at all for that. Which kind of bothered me. But anyway, um, you did hear me there, Quint, right?
Yeah, I'm still here. Attention! This is
Oh,
Central Command.
I was
We're under attack in
I was
sections
just
4 and 5. Wait, no! Ah! And then Roy's
That
all like,
was
okay, I'll just enter section two. My goodness, this is fun. And he's like, I love it how he's like doing like you remember in that like, and this is during I think the lust fight or before the lust fight where he's on like the radio and he's like trying to imitate people getting killed.
also, yeah, that part's
It's
that part's fine.
golden.
By the way,
It's
I don't,
golden.
I don't
It's
have
such
an
a
issue with
Roy thing to do.
that. Yeah, I don't, I don't have an issue with that. You know, like I'm only speaking for season one right now because
Yeah.
that's what I watched recently,
Makes sense.
and like there were definitely a few moments where the tone was just not. It was not there.
Yeah.
Uh, so like it was just the wholesomeness of Maze, you know, it's balanced out really well with the action, you know, like the
Yeah.
comedy and action. It's like, and you know, whenever there's a gag, it's like really well timed, I would say.
Yeah.
Uh, just so like also Edward on top of the train too gives that a little spectacle. I'd say, you know,
It
I
literally
think
uses
what
a
makes us
cannon on top of the train. Like, jeez, that is. Oh,
I think what makes us more unique from other train things are, you know, the framing, the way it's presented, like the way the camera angles, you know, are shot. They give
yeah,
you
they
more
pan and swoop
perspective.
with the momentum and all that.
You know, like you can see through the train. You can see that they have a very, you know, whoever directed it had a very distinct vision for this.
Hmm.
Uh, they wanted to make it a little, you know, limiting, but you know, you make out little bits of the location of the train at a time. You can see little, you know,
You can see
subsections.
attention to detail.
Yeah, and you know, Mace Hughes helping Ed out at the time he did. Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah.
Um, and that was on top of the train scene too. So that's just a top tier scene right there.
Yep.
And by the way, that's followed up immediately by Ed's gag of
Yeah.
the intercom.
Yep.
So that's just like a string of banger moments all at once right there.
Indeed.
And lastly, there is one more thing to cover
All
before ending the
right.
talk. So we have this end section of the train. Roy Roy tries to you know, Roy is obviously developing his, you know, like because Edward and Roy and all three, you know, part of their arc is that they have differences, uh extreme differences.
Yeah.
And
Roy and
as
Ed
a
in this
result,
version are not as like I'd say closely woven as they were in Brotherhood. I kind of like that though.
yeah, yeah. Uh because it's, you know, like, you know, that's just part of their arc is because like Edward, you know, he's obviously, you know, all three very much portrays Edward as the doubtful, you know, cynic, whereas Roy just wants to make him realize that he's only human. He can only go so far,
Yeah, Roy
and
seems a lot more laid
tries
back
to,
as opposed to Ed, who's surprisingly more uptight.
yeah. And as a result, Roy, you know, kind of tries to get in his way for honestly pretty good reasons. Since, well, without that, Edward would probably be kicking up a storm because you know stuff like the neon events.
Fair points,
Uh,
bro.
just you know, like I usually respect the decisions Roy takes in all three, even if later on, you know, he gets a little more suspicious. You know, that's just part of his arc.
Yeah, and he
Um,
kind
uh,
of had to be that way, especially with, like the
of
rest of the
course.
shady side of the military. He kind of had to blend in one way or another.
Well, that's what I love about all three is like that. You know, the military are more shady. You know,
Yeah,
they're
like it
not
actually
exactly.
makes characters gray zones. It's more intriguing because characters have more gray zones. Like, what are they willing to do to live?
Yeah, and it makes the series like it makes the watch experience for me more tense. Since you see moments like the in episode 13 where they're like showed deal at Douglas, and then someone like the Iron Blood Alchemist comes along and he's like, "Your job is not to ask questions."
Yeah.
That was actually dub only, by the way.
Oh, damn.
Um, yeah. Your line is only ask questions, Colonel. And uh, actually, I think adds even more to the freaking intimidation of the military because they are just a bunch of like
They like
really
there is a lot of like things that they don't want the people to see, both in their
yeah
ranks and in the general public.
yeah, and it keeps it very like even you know what I love about it is even at the end, it's like they're very limiting with it. They're like, but we won't tell you everything. I actually do like that because it's very screws loose. Like they're they're not pulling any punches with the military here.
Yeah. All right. So we've
Yeah,
right about
it's
reached our
just,
recording
well,
thresholds. Hmm?
I think it adds to like the badass appeal of the military, the fact that they're supposed to be like big and tough guys. It actually kind of does expand on the the Arcaba concept in a way.
Yeah,
So the way she wrote it, uh, I think it's just a natural progression. What can I say?
indeed. All right. So we've right about reached our recording threshold. So we're gonna have to end really soon here. Is there any last second comments you want to make before I stop the recording?
No, though there is one thing.
Oh, okay.
Um, I funnily enough, this seems to be the one time where I was actually talking a little more than you.
That's true. Yeah, I wanted to give you a little more time to chat because I typically interrupt a little bit here and there. So I want to give you more time to chat because it's a podcast, it's a team effort.
I
Got to
will
make the
admit,
most of it.
I will admit, it was pretty exhilarating to go off there.
Yeah, so now you see why I enjoy doing it so much.
Yeah, that was pretty fuel. That was pretty fuel.
Alrighty then. Well, I think that brings this podcast to a close. I'm Quinn866. Have a good one, and
Kata, uh, Katashiki signing out.
okie dokie.